The ballroom of the Rothwell estate in East Hampton glittered like a jewel box. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, scattering firelight across the polished oak floors. Outside, manicured lawns rolled toward the Atlantic, where the tide sang faintly against the shore. Inside, the air smelled of peonies, champagne, and money that expected admiration, demanded deference, and was used to buying both. At 71, I, Vivian Rothwell, had grown accustomed to such nights. I had hosted senators, foreign dignitaries, and billionaires in this very room. I knew how to walk through crowds of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos with my chin high, my pearls glowing softly under the lights, as though they absorbed the dignity I carried like a second skin. Tonight, however, I was not hostess. I was a guest at my grandson's wedding reception, an event that had cost more than most families' lifetime savings. And as I glided toward my table, gown whispering at my ankles, I reminded myself of one truth that had been my compass through a lifetime of sacrifice: dignity is not the absence of insult, but the refusal to bow to it. But dignity can be tested. When I reached my seat, a round table draped in ivory silk, I froze. There, propped against the crystal water glass, was my name card. Bold letters in cursive, meant to be decorative, instead mocked me with their simplicity. ATM Nana. The words were meant as a joke. That much was obvious from the snickers rising at the table next to mine. A cluster of young women in designer gowns, friends of the bride, their makeup flawless and their laughter shallow, were glancing at me, nudging each other like schoolgirls who had successfully pulled a prank. Their manicured fingers pointed ever so slightly in my direction, just enough to sting. Across the room, Madison Hale, now Madison Rothwell, caught my eye. She was radiant in her satin gown, her smile dazzling under the chandeliers. But the smirk that curved her lips as she raised her champagne glass was not the smile of a new bride grateful for love or family. No, it was the smirk of a woman who had just humiliated her husband's grandmother and knew she had an audience to enjoy it. The smirk of someone who thought she was untouchable. I smiled back, the kind of smile that has carried me through boardrooms, betrayals, and battles. The kind that masks more than it reveals. My years had taught me restraint. My years had taught me patience. My years had taught me that silence is often the sharpest blade. But even as I smiled, my heart pressed against my ribs. The words on that card stripped me down to nothing but a wallet in their eyes. Not a matriarch, not a woman who had clawed her way from a middle-class childhood in Brooklyn to the owner of a real estate empire spanning Manhattan, Boston, and Miami. Just a purse and heels. I set my clutch carefully on the table. My fingers brushed against the envelope inside, a thick, sealed packet my lawyer had prepared years ago. Your ace in the hole, Vivian, Carter Blake had called it. Not for everyday use. Only when the insult is too heavy to bear. And tonight, it seemed, the weight had finally settled. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just knowing it was there steadied me, like a pistol tucked discreetly into a handbag. My shield. My weapon. The chatter of the room rose and fell around me, but inside my head, numbers ticked like a relentless metronome. $25,000 for the gown Madison wore. $50,000 for the orchestra, whose violins already floated through the air like honey. $12,000 for the cake, a towering creation of sugar roses and buttercream pride. Every detail of this wedding bore my signature, my checks, my sacrifices. And yet, here I sat, reduced to ATM Nana. A part of me wanted to laugh at the audacity. Another part wanted to tear the card in half and fling it at her satin-covered feet. But I did neither. Instead, I lifted the champagne flute resting beside me and took a sip, letting the bubbles sting my tongue. My silence was my shield. My composure, my weapon. As I watched Madison glide across the dance floor, her train sweeping like a crown's mantle, I remembered the first time I met her. She had been 24, a polished young woman with a bright smile and eyes that glittered with ambition. Ethan, my sweet, tender-hearted grandson, had fallen for her within weeks. And why wouldn't he? Madison was everything dazzling at first glance, charming, intelligent, driven. But I had seen the hunger beneath the polish. The way her compliments were rehearsed, her charm a tool, her smiles wielded like weapons. She dazzled just long enough to blind, but shadows always lurked behind her shine. I had held my tongue, hoping she would soften with time. Instead, she sharpened. And now, in this ballroom-turned-palace, she crowned herself queen while mocking the hand that paid for her throne. I placed my champagne flute down and traced the envelope inside my clutch. I didn't need to open it. Not yet. Just knowing it was there steadied me. Let them laugh, I thought. Let them whisper. They did not know that the rules of this family were mine to write, and mine to enforce. Across the room, applause rose as another toast was called. I clapped politely, though my mind was elsewhere. The game had begun, and they didn't even know they were playing. The band softened, violins sighing into the background as the best man, a childhood friend of Ethan's, stood and lifted his glass. His voice was flushed with wine, but his words were steady. To Ethan and Madison, he declared, "May your love be as rich as this estate and as timeless as the ocean beyond it." Cheers followed. Laughter. The clink of crystal against crystal. Then Madison stepped forward. Her gown shimmered as she reached for the microphone with the confidence of someone who believed the spotlight was her birthright. The room quieted, expectant. "Before we continue," she said sweetly, her smirk curling at the edges, "I want to give a special thank you." She paused, letting anticipation bloom. Then her voice sharpened. "To the ATM Nana, for funding my dream wedding." Laughter exploded. Loud, careless, cutting. Her friends slapped the table in amusement. Even waiters carrying champagne trays exchanged knowing looks. I sat frozen. The words sliced sharper than any blade. ATM Nana. Spoken aloud. Without shame. With delight. Ethan's face faltered. I saw it, the grimace he tried to hide, the tightening of his jaw. But he said nothing. He gripped Madison's hand tighter, as though that silent grasp could smooth the wound she had inflicted. But he said nothing. My chest tightened, not from age, but from memory. Years ago, my own daughter-in-law had once called me her walking pension plan. I had overheard her in the kitchen, groceries for her children in my arms. I hadn't confronted her then. I had smiled, swallowed, endured. But tonight? Tonight would be different. Because this time, I had come prepared. The music swelled, the champagne fizzed, and the room thrummed with admiration for the new Mrs. Rothwell. Her satin gown glimmered as she twirled on the dance floor, a queen basking in her own coronation. The laughter from her ATM Nana quip still lingered in the air, buzzing like a cruel echo. I lifted my glass slowly, my smile faint but steady. To the untrained eye, I appeared calm, dignified, untouched by her ridicule. But inside, my pulse drummed against my ribs. The words replayed in my mind like a stuck record, ATM Nana. ATM Nana. ATM Nana. As if my decades of work, my sacrifices, my empire, measured in bricks, contracts, and skyscrapers, amounted to nothing more than an open account for Madison's whims. I pressed my fingertips against the clutch at my side. The envelope inside was cool, smooth, reassuring. Carter Blake's words echoed in my mind, "Only when it cuts too deep, Vivian. Only when your dignity is stripped before witnesses. Then, and only then, you use it." I had thought, at the time, that moment would never come. But life has a way of proving us wrong. The orchestra softened. The best man had given his toast. It was customary now for the bride and groom to speak. Ethan, my sweet grandson, hesitated. His voice, gentle and fragile, would have crumbled under the weight of so many eyes. But Madison never hesitated. She relished spotlights the way moths relish flames. She seized the microphone again, her smirk practically glowing. "First, thank you to all of you," she began, her tone dripping with false warmth. "Tonight has been everything I dreamed of." She glanced sideways at Ethan, her lashes lowered in the performance of devotion. "And of course, thanks to my husband, who gave me the greatest gift, his love." Applause. Cheers. A sea of smiling faces. Then her smile sharpened. Her eyes flicked to me, glittering like glass. "And let's not forget," she continued, her voice lilting with theatrical sweetness, "the one who made all this possible. Our very own ATM Nana. For the ring, the cake, the band, this ballroom. Even this glass of champagne, cheers to her wallet." Laughter erupted. Louder this time, reckless and cruel. Guests tipped back their heads, clapping as if it were the cleverest joke of the evening. Ethan's hand twitched at his side. His smile wavered, flickered, then broke into a grimace he tried, and failed, to hide. But again, he said nothing. I studied his face. The shame etched there. The conflict in his eyes. He loved her. He had married her. And in his silence, he betrayed me. My chest burned. Memory pressed against me, insistent. The voice of my former daughter-in-law whispering that I was just her walking pension plan. The years of endurance. The decades of swallowing insult with a polite smile. Enough. I rose. The silk of my gown shimmered as I moved, each step deliberate, echoing softly against the oak floors. Conversation faltered. Then stilled. The weight of curiosity filled the air. I reached the stage and extended my hand. "May I?" The master of ceremonies, flustered, handed me the microphone. My voice, when it filled the room, was not raised. Yet it carried. Steady, controlled, as sharp as a scalpel. "Thank you for your warm toasts," I began. My eyes swept the ballroom, pausing on Madison, whose smirk trembled at the edges. But in the Rothwell family, there is a principle that has always been upheld. Respect is not optional. A hush thickened. Even the waiters froze, trays balanced midair. "Years ago," I continued, "after too many careless words were spoken in jest, I amended the Rothwell family trust. It is called the Respect Clause. It states, any heir, or their spouse, who publicly insults a grandparent forfeits all trust distributions for 12 months. Subject to review." The silence that followed was not empty. It was electric, charged, like the air before a storm. Whispers crackled. Guests leaned toward each other, wide-eyed. Madison's laugh cut through it. Sharp, brittle, too loud. "You're joking," she scoffed, her voice ringing with disbelief. "That's not real. You can't be serious." I held her gaze. My smile was steady. Calm. Dangerous. "You think I would come unprepared?" My eyes shifted to Carter Blake, seated near the back. Stoic. Impeccable. Always precise. He rose, adjusting his tie as he moved to the center of the room. In his hand, he carried a slim leather folder. His voice, when he spoke, resonated with the clarity of law itself. "The terms are clear. The insult has been documented. Effective immediately, Mrs. Madison Rothwell's access to the trust is suspended for 12 months. Subject to Mrs. Rothwell's discretion. The pause begins tonight." Gasps rippled through the hall. A woman nearly dropped her glass. Men shifted uncomfortably in their tuxedos. The orchestra had gone silent, their instruments cradled in tense hands. I watched the color drain from Madison's face. The smirk vanished. In its place bloomed panic. 12 months. $50,000 per month. Gone. Her lifeline severed in the span of a heartbeat. She blinked rapidly, her hand clutching Ethan's. "Say something," she hissed, desperation cracking her polished voice. But Ethan stood frozen. His lips parted, but no words came. His eyes were torn fields of storm, love, shame, loyalty, all colliding. His silence was his only refuge. The murmurs grew louder, spreading like wildfire. Some scandalized, others delighted. In their eyes, I saw both judgment and admiration. They had not expected a matriarch to enforce her authority in public. But they would not forget it. I let the moment breathe. The balance had shifted. No longer was I the punchline. No longer was I a wallet in heels. I was the hand that wrote the rules, and the hand that enforced them. Finally, I raised my glass once more. My voice was soft, but steady. "To family," I said, my eyes never leaving Madison's stricken face. "Where love is cherished, and respect is non-negotiable." Applause began hesitantly, from the older guests, those who understood. Then it spread, catching fire. The ballroom was alive again, but the laughter was gone. In its place was awe, shock, and recognition of power. I stepped down from the stage, the envelope in my clutch pressing against my hand like a silent ally. The night was not over. The game had only just begun. The ballroom had not yet recovered from the shock of my declaration. Conversation returned in cautious waves, guests whispering behind raised hands, eyes darting between me, Madison, and Ethan as though watching a play unfold on stage. The orchestra attempted to resume, violins trembling back to life, but their notes sounded uncertain, brittle. Everyone knew the story of the night had already been written. And Madison hated not being its author. Her face, so carefully maintained, powdered and flawless, was cracked now with fury. The mask of charm had slipped, and the ambition that always simmered beneath shone raw and unfiltered. She leaned toward Ethan, her nails biting into his sleeve. "Do something," she whispered harshly. But he remained still, his gaze lowered to the floor as if he could vanish into the grain of the wood. When he didn't respond, Madison's chest heaved. She seized the microphone back from its stand. Her laugh, brittle and desperate, burst across the room. "Well," she said loudly, her voice pitched high to mask the tremor, "isn't this just adorable? Nana thinks she's still running the family like it's the 1950s. Newsflash, your money doesn't buy you respect. It just buys you a front row seat to watch the next generation take over." Gasps. A few choked laughs from her friends, half-hearted, nervous. The tension was suffocating now, the kind that makes one shift in a tuxedo, unsure where to look. I stood still. Calm. She was unraveling herself. Madison forged ahead, oblivious. "Honestly, the only reason people put up with you is because you write the checks. Take that away, and you're just another bitter old woman with pearls and opinions no one asked for." The room froze. Even her friends stopped laughing. Ethan's face was ashen. His hand, gripping the edge of the table, trembled faintly. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice, when it came, was steady. "Thank you, Madison," I said softly. The microphone amplified my tone, turning gentleness into iron. "You've clarified things." I turned toward Carter Blake, who was standing at attention like a sentinel. "Mr. Blake, would you please read the secondary clause?" He adjusted his glasses and opened the folder, his voice carrying like a verdict. "Yes, Mrs. Rothwell. The respect clause contains a subsection. If a public insult is repeated after initial enforcement, the suspension extends an additional 12 months. If the insult is malicious and deliberate, the trustees may consider permanent forfeiture, at the matriarch's discretion. The whispers surged. The ballroom buzzed like a hive rattled with a stick. Madison's face drained of color. She sputtered, grasping for words. You can't. That's ridiculous. She turned to Ethan, her voice breaking. Tell her. Tell her she can't do this. But Ethan said nothing. His silence was louder than any rebuke. I lifted my glass again, slow and deliberate. Effective immediately, I said, each word measured, your suspension extends to 24 months. 2 years, Madison. 2 years without a cent from this family's fortune. The sound that escaped her was not laughter, nor a protest. It was a strangled cry of disbelief. Her friends had withdrawn now, their faces pale, suddenly remembering their own trust funds, their own parents, their own obligations. They shifted their chairs away from her as though her defiance were contagious. She stood frozen, her hand gripping the microphone so tightly her knuckles whitened. You'll regret this, she hissed finally, her voice shaking with venom. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. You're just a woman clinging to control, and one day no one will care about your clauses or your little rules. You'll die alone, clutching your pearls, and I'll still be standing. Her words cracked the room like thunder. And then, silence. I let it linger. Let it settle like dust after an explosion. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel. I may die alone, Madison, I said. But you? You may live surrounded, and still be empty. Because respect cannot be bought, stolen, or demanded. It must be earned. And you, my dear, have not even begun. The room was utterly still. Madison's chest rose and fell rapidly, her composure gone, her mask shattered. She was no longer the radiant bride, she was a desperate girl caught stealing crowns she had not earned. She flung the microphone back onto the stand with a clatter and stormed across the ballroom, her train snagging briefly on the corner of a chair. Her heels struck the wood like gunshots. The double doors slammed behind her. The silence she left behind was almost holy. I lowered my glass, the bubbles fizzing faintly against my lip. Around me, people stirred, some in disbelief, some in awe. The orchestra did not resume. The chatter was cautious, fragmented. But every eye that met mine now carried something different. Not ridicule. Not dismissal. But recognition. Ethan remained seated, his face pale, his hands trembling against his lap. He had chosen silence, but silence was also a choice. I stepped down from the stage and returned to my table. The envelope in my clutch felt lighter now, as though its purpose had been fulfilled. The night was fractured, but I was not. Madison thought she could crown herself queen. But I had reminded her, reminded everyone, who wrote the rules in this kingdom. And the game was not yet over. Not by far. The ballroom lingered in uneasy fragments after Madison's storming exit. Champagne flutes stood abandoned, half-drunk, their bubbles gone flat. The orchestra sat frozen, bows resting limply against strings. Guests exchanged hushed murmurs, not daring to speak at full volume, as though sound itself might summon her back. I remained seated, spine straight, gaze fixed on the golden chandeliers above. To many, it may have looked like composure. In truth, it was resolve. Madison believed the game was over. That her dramatic exit, her venomous words, had ended the evening in her favor. But she underestimated something vital: endings belong to those who claim them. And I had not yet spoken my last word. Ethan found me first. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. "Grandmother," he whispered, voice trembling. "Please, you've made your point. Don't destroy her." The boy I had raised, the boy who once pressed dandelions into my palm, asking if they were gold, now standing before me, a man caught between love and loyalty. I reached for his hand, steadying it between mine. Ethan, I said softly, I do not destroy. I reveal. She destroyed herself tonight. I merely held up the mirror. His throat worked as if swallowing shards of glass. He wanted to argue, to plead, but he couldn't deny the truth. Madison's words had not been slips of the tongue, they were knives, wielded with intent. Still, his eyes begged me. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But love without boundaries is not love. It is surrender. And I had not built this dynasty on surrender. The following morning, the Hamptons awoke to whispers. News travels fast when the rich are involved, faster still when scandal accompanies it. By breakfast, I received 3 calls from acquaintances, each beginning with a falsely casual, so, I heard something unusual happened at the wedding. By noon, the tabloids had their hands on it. The headlines were merciless. Hampton's wedding erupts, heiress cut off by billionaire grandmother. The ATM Nana scandal. Socialite bride frozen out of fortune. The photographs were unflattering, Madison's face twisted in rage, her arm outstretched, the microphone clattering midair. Next to her, I appeared serene, a sphinx in silk. The narrative had escaped her control, and she knew it. By afternoon, she arrived at my estate. Not in her rolls, not with her entourage. Alone. The staff showed her into the library, where the fire crackled against the hush of leather-bound volumes. She stood rigid, her designer coat hanging from her shoulders like armor. Fix this, she demanded, skipping courtesy. Her voice was hoarse, raw from either crying or screaming. I closed my book and regarded her. Fix what? The press, she spat. The headlines. They're humiliating. Everyone's laughing at me. Do you understand what this will do to my brand? I almost smiled. Her brand. You brought that upon yourself, I said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. You think you've won, don't you? But this isn't over. I know people. I can spin this. I can tell the world you're a tyrant, controlling, cruel. I raised a hand, silencing her. My calmness unsettled her more than anger ever could. You forget, I said quietly, who owns the narrative. I don't need to spin. I simply live, and the world writes. You, Madison, require an audience. I do not. That is the difference between queens and pretenders. Her lips trembled, but she forced them into a sneer. You're old. Time isn't on your side. One day, Ethan will inherit everything, and I'll still be here. Waiting. I studied her, then reached for the envelope that had sat in my clutch since the wedding. I had not planned to use it, not then, not so soon. But life rarely waits for perfect timing. I slid it across the mahogany table. Open it. She hesitated, suspicion flickering in her eyes. Then she tore it open. Inside, crisp legal parchment bore Carter Blake's meticulous handwriting. Her eyes scanned, widening with each line. Her voice cracked. This isn't possible. It is, I said. You see, the Rothwell Trust doesn't transfer blindly upon my death. It moves to the next generation, with conditions. The respect clause follows it. Ethan cannot access it unless his spouse meets its terms. And if his spouse fails, the trustees have discretion to divert his share to philanthropy. To schools. Hospitals. Research. Causes that will outlive us all. Her hands shook as she held the paper. You'd rather give it to strangers than to your own blood? No, I said softly. I would rather give it to those who value it. Blood is not the same as loyalty. Marriage is not the same as respect. You proved last night that you deserve neither. Her composure crumbled. The polished facade cracked, and beneath it was not strength, but desperation. You can't do this, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. I already have. The fire popped. Outside, the winter wind howled faintly against the glass. For the first time since I had met her, Madison Rothwell had no words. She gathered her coat, the papers trembling in her hand, and left without another glance. Weeks passed. The tabloids found newer scandals, fresher prey. But in the Hamptons, in Manhattan, in every whispered corner of high society, the story lingered. The grandmother who stood her ground. The bride who lost 2 years. The dynasty that proved respect could not be purchased with diamonds. And Madison? She tried, at first, to claw back. Whisper campaigns. Carefully planted stories. Tearful confessions to friends who leaked them conveniently. But the tide had turned. Her name became shorthand for arrogance unchecked. Invitations dwindled. Partnerships evaporated. Her brand collapsed under the weight of ridicule. Ethan, torn and weary, came to me one evening. His eyes were hollow, his voice hoarse. I love her, he admitted. But I see her now. Truly. And I can't unsee it. I said nothing. Love is a battlefield each must navigate alone. But when he left, I saw the envelope still in his hand, and I knew choices were already forming in his heart. Months later, as spring painted the Hamptons green again, I hosted a gathering at the estate. Smaller this time, intimate. Family, old friends, trusted confidants. The air was lighter, laughter genuine. Glasses clinked not in mockery, but in celebration. And as I stood at the head of the table, watching Ethan smile, not the strained, hollow smile of that wedding night, but something real, unburdened, I felt a rare stillness settle over me. The empire was secure. My dignity intact. The respect clause had done its work. I lifted my glass. To family, I said once more. But this time, the words carried no sting, no edge of warning. Only truth. To family, where love is cherished, and respect is non-negotiable. And this time, the applause that followed was not polite. It was thunderous. In the years that followed, the Rothwell name endured. The trust funded scholarships, hospitals, research wings. Ethan found his footing, his voice, and perhaps, one day, he would find love that honored him rather than drained him. As for Madison, her story became a cautionary tale told at dinner parties, whispered in prep schools, gossiped about on yachts. The girl who mocked the ATM Nana, only to discover the vault had locks she could not break. And me? I did not die alone, as she had once promised. I lived surrounded by those who had earned their place, not through entitlement, but through respect. The queen remained queen, not by wealth, but by will. And the world remembered. How many of you can tolerate such a granddaughter-in-law? If you enjoyed this story and believe that foul characters should not be tolerated by anyone no matter your age, keep visiting for more of such stories. You can subscribe and be notified as soon as new stories are dropped.